I'm Mark Seifter.
And I'm Linda Zayas Palmer.
And this is Arcane Mark. Welcome everyone to DevTools Interactive Specials. How to build them, what are the pitfalls, what are the challenges, how do you get so many different sub-tiers into the same interactive special, and along the way we might learn a little bit about those not interactive specials but also super long replayable specials too, from some of the things that are overlaps. Today, pretty much a large percentage of your content is going to come from Linda, so I will be the voice of the every person who is asking about interactive specials, and our wonderful Arcade Mark Twitch community is going to provide a lot of questions as well. So for anyone who loves interactive specials, uh, wants to know more about interactive specials, is interested in trying an interactive special, this is going to be an episode for you to learn more about what goes into it and what is it other than a whirlwind when you sit down at the table of different encounters.
How do you make one of those things anyway?
Yeah.
So I'd like to point out that the most recent interactive special to come out is Siege of Galaspire. Only a few people have had a chance to play that. So while I'll be touching on that a little bit, I won't be getting into any spoilers. The extent to which I'll be talking about it, no plot spoilers. I'll be talking a little bit about it structurally from the perspective of things that have been already widely distributed and that are good for players because they're good for players to know going in to have the best possible experience.
I mean, we have no reason to really spoil any of the other ones either.
Yeah.
Like, there's not really a good reason for us to say, and then he splits into a million monks. I just said it anyway, and I didn't say which one it was for.
Yeah.
But there wasn't really a reason for it.
Well.
Oh, also, by the way, thanks for subscribing at Tier 2. Brian, that's going to that's going to make us really likely to get some more emojis to make sure Tier 2 has one, that we don't keep moving down into Tier 1. So let's start off. What is an interactive special? So first of all, before you answer, Linda, yes. Night Fox, I would like to thank you for your dedication to the Arcade Mark community, that you saw an episode that was about interactive specials, and you were thinking, Mark and Linda are going to put together something that's fun enough for me to watch, that even though I don't know what it is, I want to watch that. So that's pretty awesome. But Linda, Night Fox also gave you pretty much the best possible question to start off with for some of our viewers here, especially on YouTube, who are just clicking on the link. What is an interactive special?
So an interactive special is a scenario that is designed to be played by multiple tables at once in a way that all of the tables are working together towards shared objectives, and there are certain successes that are achieved collectively. So generally in an interactive special, there will be certain conditions that say you complete a certain encounter, and it says like, you earn a let's see, give me a, like, you earn a shiny Leshy success. Because you helped the Leshies in this garden.
And if enough shining Leshy successes occur, then there'll be an announcement that is like you hear an angelic choir as on wings of leaves and feathers
and rainbows,
and rainbows. A horde of roselings from Nirvana and celestial Leshies descend upon the field of battle. Everyone, table GMs, the Leshy horde effect is in effect.
So then, yeah, basically in an interactive special, you have certain conditions that will come up that, based on enough successes that are earned at tables, when those conditions trigger, the GMs have instructions in their scenarios to make certain modifications and cause certain things to happen that are beneficial to the players. Also, interactive specials, which Numbat points out are also called multi-table specials, multi-table interactives, things like that. Interactive specials also have certain points where the adventure syncs up, so that everyone will be concluding one part and moving to the next part at the same time. So everyone is running the same adventure, Night Fox, but multi-table specials also support many sub-tiers in general. So, for example, we had, they might be, a lot of them will be 1 to 11, We also have Siege of Galaspire is 5 to 16. So then you have all these different so then you have all these different sub tiers, but they're all working together toward the same general
So
goals.
there
They're
is
all fighting the same general bits.
there's one exception.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes the adventure card game also is part of an interactive special, in which case they are not running the same adventure, but they're
Yes.
running something else that is clearly happening at the same time. So, for instance, one time when the tapestry was falling apart, which you'll find out like at the beginning of that
Mm-hmm.
interactive special, uh, there are certain regions that the RPG characters are dealing with, while the Adventure Card Guild characters are dealing with the ocean and like aquatic areas in the tapestry because they had the Skull and Shackles box. And so everything that the announcer announces is like, oh no, all these bad things are happening in the tapestry is happening to everybody,
Mm-hmm.
but they technically have a different adventure because it's for the card game, so it's not the same adventure.
Yeah, and when you speak of the announcer, there's a few extra roles that go into an interactive special. There's the overseer GM who handles coordination, who will generally reads the announcements, the box text to the entire house. Who's also responsible for making sure that mustering goes well, for fixing the problems that inevitably happen, and for answering questions during the special.
There's a few questions
Yeah,
up here, so
let's take some of those.
some of them are simple enough that I can answer them. Other, we're gonna need you, Linda. So
Yeah.
Paisley heard last year or the year before the card game tables were succeeding too often before anybody else could. Is that fixed? So sort of. Siege of Gallspire does not have a card component.
We did not. We didn't specifically go in and change that. The card table successes are function more like wild cards in that one. So yeah, we didn't specifically go back and fix that. This is actually the first time I'm hearing of that issue.
All right. So Craig D asks, "Are interactive specials only run at conventions?" No. Anytime you can get together an event that has the minimum number of tables, you can run it as long as it's not during an exclusivity period where only certain conventions can get it. For example, when Linda and I were sort of the store liaisons for the flagship store in the Boston Lodge and the Venture Lieutenants, we ran quite a few interactive specials that were just at that store with all the tables we could get at that store because we could get enough tables at that store.
In general, each interactive special has a different requirement, but they all require somewhere between 3 and 5 tables minimum to run them. So it depends upon the special, and they should say that.
So
in each of the specials
next
themselves.
question from Kubats is, how did interactive specials come to be? Who came up with the idea? What was the inspiration for it? So I'm fairly sure because the first interactive special for Pathfinder Society was this is not something I'm fairly sure. I'm sure the first one that was publicly released was Year of the Shadow Lodge, that was played at the start of season 2, so after 2 years of Pathfinder Society. But I'm fairly sure the inspiration for the idea of this big giant thing that people are doing would have come from previous organized plays and like the specials and interactive that they had. So a lot of people in early Pathfinder Society time, and just generally in top echelons of Paizo overall, were players of the RPGA. So they played Living Greyhawk. Some of them played Living City too, and some of the other RPGA games. And they had some specials that were sometimes just literally only run that one time, and if you could get into it, that was the only way you could play it. There have been a few of those in Paizo's history as well, like unique grand convocations that were only run at PaizoCon, for example. But mostly interactive specials are something that anybody can experience as long as there's enough tables to have the interactive experience.
Yeah, practically speaking, it doesn't really make sense for us to release things that are so limited. And when we can release things that can go out to a much wider audience.
All right. So let's see. There's also some discussion about overseeing things this weekend. Also, Alex Agunis says hi, Alex, and Figelab2 says we've also run them across multiple venues by using Facebook chat for the coordinator to contact GMs in order to get the tables. Certainly, Linda is sort of like the Overseer Extraordinaire, and she has overseen a special where everyone except her was at a different location.
I didn't get called in to do that. And then the funny thing was
They
that
could
the microphone or the audio coming back to me didn't work, so they could not communicate with me verbally. What they had, but I could project my voice to them. So what I ended up having is a designated texter at each table who had my phone number, who texted me their successes, and then I tabulated them, and then I announced through.
Yep.
That was an adventure.
That was your 10th
I
oversight
think
for
that,
your
yeah.
which triggered your 5th
I
star,
think
right?
that was what triggered my 5th star. Yeah.
Yep. It was.
I've done more since then,
It was
but
quite a show.
yeah.
So Lynn is not just, as I said in the announcement leading up to this, the developer of the last 2 Pathfinder Society interactive specials, and also pretty much most of the replayable super long Pathfinder Society adventures. She's also overseen a ton of interactive specials herself, um, and so that is something that leads. Sort of, I think those are tied together. So, like,
Yeah,
what
they are.
what kind of insights do you think you took from being an overseer into developing interactive specials?
Yeah, so in terms of insights from being an overseer GM, it's knowing what, it's getting a sense of the read of the room and how people tend to respond to different aspects within the special. Because as the overseer GM, when you're not actively answering questions, or tallying up success conditions, you're watching the room to see what the mood of the room is. You're listening to hear when people get most excited about successes. You're also the one who's receiving complaints. So if something goes wrong, if someone doesn't like an encounter, if there's a mechanic that people don't like, you're going to be the one who hears about it. So I was able to gather feedback from there to see some of the things that people liked more and some of the things that people didn't like as much. And one of the strongest things that I got from that too was in terms of hard transitions. Um, People don't like it when their encounter is interrupted. So in an interactive special, the more that we can create sections that are flexible in terms of how many encounters you can do, that it says, okay, this is a long segment, you can do these encounters in any order, and then you give the tables a 15-minute warning, hey, okay, 15 minutes left, and after 15 minutes, we're going to move on. The less that you're going to have sort of that jarring sense of, oh, well, we didn't get to do something here.
So that's the example of the good thing.
Yes.
The bad example is a wave of elementals are here. Can anyone make an opening? The first table out of the entire house of people playing who defeats an elemental immediately stops the encounter.
Yes.
Because that happened at Gen Con, and most people's tables were not finished rolling initiative by the time that somebody used the save or lose spell. And it's not even that save or lose spells are busted in PF1, it's just that if you have 100 tables, one of them will go quickly, win initiative, and throw a save or lose spell.
Mm-hmm.
So it was like, we hadn't determined the initiative order at our table when we were playing it, and it was like, oh, no, next thing.
Yeah, so an interactive special, pace-wise, I generally like to have it set up so that in order to have a fulfilling experience with the special, it requires you to do even a little bit fewer encounters than a standard scenario, because then that way even tables that are a little slower than average can still feel like they're contributing to each individual piece. And then if you're looking for players who are faster than that, because there's a lot of tables that are going to be faster than that, an interactive special should be able to handle players playing about triple the number of encounters that you'll see in a standard scenario. And in so doing, one way that there's good ways to generate a lot of additional encounters, and there's bad ways to generate a lot of additional encounters. So,
I know. I'll say the bad ways.
All right, yeah, go ahead.
Okay, a wave of sheer demons. Let's roll a d6. A wave of sheer demons. Roll a d6. A wave of sheer demons. Oh, and some more crusaders that you need to help. Roll a d6. A wave of sheer demons. I feel like that d6 had things that weren't sheer demons, but RGM only rolled a wave of sheer demons.
Yep. Yeah, so generally making sure that there is more variety in what those optional encounters can be. And it can also be, and also then like telling the GM that they can choose is also really important when you present the different options, so that people don't get stuck, and also telling the GM that they can that they can say, okay, you know what, you guys have definitely contributed more than your fair share, like we can take a break and things like that.
So Kubets is wondering, as the overseer, how much flexibility do you have? What can you change if necessary? Do overseers get together in an overseers club and give feedback for Paizo for the next interactive special? And is there a chance for updates to interactive specials based on the overseers?
There is a chance for updates to interactive specials based on feedback. At PaizoCon, Siege of Gallowspire, there were a fair number of updates that came in, but that's kind of a different situation because I was also the overseer GM, so I was also the one answering all the GM questions beforehand and during the special. So I kind of had both roles on that part, and we put out a relatively extensive update to handle those questions and improve some of the weak points of the adventure. In terms of the overseers, I mean, feedback is always welcome. Overseers definitely have sort of a perspective in which they would have received feedback from more people, so they're probably going to have more of a condensed sense of how the event went overall. And unlike table GMs, they actually had a chance to see what the other tables are. Feedback is always welcome. In terms of overseer flexibility, generally, like a table GM, the overseer GM is interpreting what it says in the adventure. But the overseer GM is also going to have to handle situations where weird things happen. So, for example, if your tier 3 to 4 table tier 3 to 4 table you hear is fighting a Wendigo, or
we told you guys about
we
that.
told you about that one, then you can say like, okay, cut that out. Or if you have a situation where there's a conflict between a GM and some players, or another issue. I had another one I was overseeing where a player didn't know how to play their character and didn't have the sources. And so the GM said, okay, well, you're going to need to play a pre-generated character. That player quit at the table, and another player quit the table and did this weird thing where he took his binder of chronicle sheets and started ripping them in half in front of me, I was supposed to do something about that. It's like, okay, I don't have patience for that kind of manipulation. But anyway, so that happened, and so we lost 2 players in the middle of the special.
Actually, the guy who ripped everything apart waited until the end of the special.
You're right.
And
He
then he
waited. That's right. He waited until the end of the special, and then he came out to me to rip his chronicle sheets in front of me.
But the guy who left, you had to replace. Because he left that table.
He left the table too short of players.
2 players, so they already had 3.
Yeah. So because the table was short, then we ended up going to another table that had plenty of players and asking one of them for a volunteer to move to that other table so that
that was the next lower sub tier. So he had to. He went up, and I think what Linda said was that the group noticed that the other group had lost a member, and so they met up, and she let them cast spells or do other things to help each other
out,
and then they moved on to the next encounter.
So there's some discretion in that regard in terms of the extent of interactivity, particularly with the smaller ones. If you're running for a 3 to 5 table one, you may be able to do a little more in terms of oh yeah, this buff goes to more people. But when you're running at a big event like a PaizoCon or Gen Con, you really can't do that stuff.
I know at small events you would do things like let people who died call for a breath of life from the other tables and have the cleric go over and give it if they wanted to. Also, other things that come up that you've had to deal with a lot as time.
Mm-hmm.
It says a particular amount of time.
Yeah.
But sometimes, the hotel comes and tells you don't have that much
time.
Sometimes the hotel
comes and tells you you don't have enough time. Sometimes the hotel comes and tells you that you're too loud, so you need to be quiet. Sometimes things are going. Sometimes
something just takes longer for some reason.
Yeah. Sometimes
and
there
you
was
need
a logistics,
to
and you need to improvise a change. Sometimes people are going through the successes really fast, and you may want to shorten the part a little bit, but you have to be careful to make sure that tables are still finishing, and it's not just fast people are blitzing. Sometimes you may need to make the judgment call to extend a part a little bit if the tables are really dragging and you think that's going to be in the best interest of the house. But that's something to be done carefully.
Very carefully.
Very carefully.
You could wind up giving them a bunch of special benefits that they didn't really earn, but they only earned because you randomly
so for example, I was planning to do that once when I thought that I was going to have to run an interactive special where half of the house was in one room and half of the house was in another, because I knew that was going to create enough delay and disruption that was going to unfairly penalize people in terms of how much time they would have. So I was going to put in an extension in that case, but I didn't end up having to do that. Yeah, let's see what else. I've had GM. I've had a case where it was a small enough convention that they didn't have any backups, but a GM was late and on the way. So I sat down and started running the first part of the adventure. They all start with sort of a part one that's a mustering phase. So I just basically ran the mustering phase for that group, and then gave that GM about 5 minutes to sit down when he got in with that information that he got, so he could like breathe for a second and then started. So the overseer, yeah. So the mustering phase is super important because you're gonna have people coming in at different times. In general, the mustering phase has fun but non-essential information in it. So skill checks to find out information in Siege of Gallowspire. Because of the complexity of, as you'll see on the blogs if you look at that, because of the complexity of the idea of 8 characters, with 8 characters in Siege of Gallowspire, in case you were playing this, 8 characters are up to 3 of your other PCs that you can bring to help out with the adventure.
It's your Avengers squad.
It's your Avengers squad. 8 characters can be any character of level 5 or above, so 5 to 20. In order to bring an 8 character to Siege of Gallowspire, all you need is that character's most recently earned Chronicle sheet, because that character may incur expenses or bad things or have other things happen during the adventure if you choose to take risks with them, and you need a way to note that down. Information we're trying to spread as widely as possible for all Siege of Gallowspire players, and have posted in multiple places on the side. Yes, bring your Avengers. Please bring your Avengers. The more people bring those, the more fun the adventure will be.
I'm actually going to throw the gauntlet down for Gen Con and other conventions.
Oh, damn. Here we go.
Here's the gauntlet. PaizoCon was so flagrant in their disregard for the safety of their support characters that they maxed out every possible special support benefit and reward just easily.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to put down the gauntlet to you guys and say they did it. Not only did they make it, they did it so easily that like there was even thought of were these too low?
They weren't,
but they weren't, because it's PaizoCon and they were not raised. So this is a challenge to you to make sure that you too have such flagrant disregard for the safety of your support characters that you also get the maximum benefits.
Meta feedback. If you receive feedback from PaizoCon, then you have to be careful, because you know that feedback from PaizoCon is coming from the most dedicated and invested players. So if the most dedicated, invested, and paying attention players all brought super high level, super powered 8 characters, you can't assume that they're going to do that in other cases. Also, if PaizoCon people say that something's too easy, it's not necessarily too easy. So you just got to kind of keep that in mind when receiving feedback.
Like
is this a biased sample of
Season
the audience?
5, Siege of the Diamond City by Thurston Hillman is one of the most interesting, in a certain way, interactive specials, because the final phase was completely different depending on if you were in every couple of sub-tiers. It was just not even remotely the same thing. Like, some people were on a ballista and some people were fight a wave of sheer demons. But that was which one it was in. But in some fought demonic generals. It was really awesome. But since the benefits were disproportionate and different and you wanted to have a little bit of everything. But at PaizoCon, like, almost everyone brought Seekers, because this was one of the first adventures. It was the second one, other than Eyes of the Ten, that you could even play with a character of level 13 or above. Mm-hmm. So at PaizoCon, like, half of the tables were Seekers, and Linda and I were not playing our Seekers.
Mm-hmm.
So we saw how many times we got the Seeker benefits, and it was just not predictive of what happened afterwards.
Yeah.
But I will say this. While there were a lot of high-level players in Siege of Gallowspire, that certainly helped with the 8 characters. Mm-hmm. Like, the random group of newbies who were playing the Iconics.
Yeah. They did so well.
There were a few of them, but there was one that was a random group of newbies who were playing the Iconics, and they also literally hadn't played Pathfinder.
Yeah.
And they did above the average of the entire PaizoCon room. And it wasn't just because it was like a low-level, level 1 adventure for them. They were level 7.
They were level 7, yeah.
And it, like, literally, had they not been there and been replaced by an average table, mm-hmm. there were 2 special non-8 character-based benefits that they would not have received.
Yeah.
So
it can
be anybody.
Close on some of the rewards at PaizoCon. So we did extend the times a little bit because of how close it was.
Well, actually, they made it
Yeah,
without any extra time.
Yeah, I extended the times very slightly because of how close PaizoCon was. Because
oh right, yeah, they made it so you gave extra time for the other
because
conventions.
They barely made it, so I figured the extra conventions need a little bit more.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
All right, Night Trace. It's okay. We still think you're hardcore, even if you can't make PaizoCon, Gen Con, and all the local events. It's nice of you to go to your local events and help out there, even if you can't make PaizoCon and Gen Con. For me, PaizoCon as a fan was my favorite convention because of the intimate feel, and you get to meet with people and sort of talk to staffers and other fans. And whereas Gen Con is more of like, oh my gosh, there's so many people, but it's hectic. And out of the crowd of so many people, I feel like I met and talked to far fewer people than I did when there were fewer people overall at PaizoCon, because it's just there's so many, everybody everywhere, and you can't distinguish one person from another.
Yes,
they're very different conventions. Obviously, Gen Con is very soon, everybody.
Yeah.
But I do recommend PaizoCon for people who can attend. Especially if you two like a more intimate convention where you can sort of talk to staffers, and it's a little more personal.
You can play in our games. We actually have time to hang out as opposed to Gen Con, where
that's right.
We're constantly on booth duty.
You don't need 100,000 XP to play in games like Fighter Squad or Twilight Bell. Whoa!
Elftero just went on another Santa binge.
Oh my goodness!
Oh my God,
Elftero, thank you so much.
Wow! What is that? 5 more gift subs?
Yes. Now even a lot of the other people are subbed now. Thanks so much, Elftero. Now we see why Elftero is VIP with the little diamond. Elftero is just... Elftero and Night Trace and a few others are really helping, are helping build up the number of subscribers, and now I think...
Totally. Well, that's why they get the diamonds next to their name.
Yeah,
because they're so generous to the community.
I'm pretty sure that not only got us one more emoji, but that we're close to getting 2 more now, in addition to the squirrel. Let's see what we... Yeah, there is another slot.
Yeah, there's another slot for everybody. Yeah.
We're not super close to the last one. And when I say the last one, with 11 more subscriber points, we would get a 5th, which is the most that an affiliate can get.
Yay! And Rex Liquid just chatted the squirrel. Everybody who's a subscriber has the squirrel.
Oh yeah, I think this is this the first episode where everybody who's a subscriber has a squirrel?
I think it will.
Rex Liquid, who subscribed at tier 2, would already have the squirrel anyway, but yeah, now everyone has the squirrel.
Yay!
And it makes sense because we're completely squirreled on a squirrel subtopic.
It's just an avalanche of squirrels right now.
That's right.
Are we being told we should probably get back on topic?
Let's talk about interactive specials now. But we talked about Gen Con and PaizoCon. You can't really talk about interactive specials without talking about Gen Con and PaizoCon, because Gen Con and PaizoCon are places where you play interactive specials. So we talked a little bit about what makes them up. So interactive specials, though, as you said, usually are from tier 1 to 12 or beyond.
Yes.
So that would be 1 to 2, 3 to 4, 5 to 6, some gap at either 7 or 9.
7 or 9, yeah.
And so then either 7 to 8 or 8 to 9. Then 10 to 11, and 12 to 13. Is that right?
Brian says, I reject that a squirrel means you should get back on topic. It's a celebration.
It's a celebration.
And Nightbot says that we should squirrel Jason Bowman. Oh my God. Is he streaming today?
Is he? He was coming back from LA from his Geek and Sundry taping today. I don't know if he's streaming or not, though. Oh yeah, I assumed he should rest after all that time.
I figured he was resting, but okay. Next time we're gonna squirrel avalanche.
Next time we need to squirrel bomb Jason.
Oh yeah, I just got asked. What makes developing interactive specials different to other organized play products? Well, what is an interactive special? An interactive special is a scenario that is 2.5 times as long than is a standard scenario that has to make sense. At a range of approximately 11 levels in terms of the plot, while everyone having a way to contribute. while also having an interesting interactive mechanic that is properly scaled for different sizes of house. Um,
But the
and
house is a
the
term that we've
house
used a few
being, yes.
times, meaning all the tables combined.
It also has a. It also will probably have 8 tokens, which are a mechanic that we have in many specials that are a mechanic system to allow tables to help other tables. In creating an interactive special, because we have big projections at Gen Con, creating an interactive special also involves the process of working with the tech team to create a large projector presentation. So that adds on like about another week to it, where you're selecting art assets. There's more art to order in some ways because we need to order an art for the big map that goes up. The last couple of years, we've also run auditions and then full voice recordings for people to voice act all of the roles in the special, and then it's been a process of coordinating with the folks at Sirenscape who do all sorts of amazing sound sets for tabletop RPGs, as well as the tech team to get that presentation put together. Um, and yeah, so basically, it's like 2.5 scenarios put together with a bunch of extra stuff. An interactive special, all in all, probably takes about a month and a half of time, including all of its pieces put together. Because that being from the initial conceptualization phase to the extra time that it takes to work with the author in order to put that together and to get feedback throughout, to the fact that it is substantially longer than a standard scenario, to the fact that, and I can't stress this enough, these stat appendices for those freaking things are like 70 pages long, and we have to find all the stats and organize them all by sub-tier and cross-reference everything and page reference everything and give the descriptions of everything and style every single thing when it comes from a different book.
So Brian said the audio production for Gallowspire Paizo was delightful. It was, it was worth getting all of that.
Well,
those
the auditions were the audition process and everything there was super fun. And one thing I was really excited about for Gallowspire is no spoilers, but Gallowspire, in contrast to Hajin Cataclysm, which only had 2 voices, Gallowspire has a ton of voices. So being able to work with a lot of different folks at Paizo to do those was really awesome. And the way that I did those auditions is basically I sent out an email to the global everyone at Paizo email address, which I will not be sharing publicly ever. But to the global everybody address, and basically said, hey, I'm going to be doing this special. If you'd like to do this, we're going to be doing this during this week. Let me know. Let's schedule an audition time. We'll come in and we'll run those. And this year was interesting because it was also like because Dan was there just in time to do the auditions, but he was gone by the time we did the recording. So ended up Brian Bauman was the one who helped us out a ton with that. And then when Brian was one of our voices, so when Brian was doing his voice, then Tanya got behind the soundboard because she has some experience with that.
So there's some questions about the story. And I think I know the answer to this one, but I'll let you answer it, Linda.
Yeah.
Our interactive specials normally start as an idea that was already a scenario, but it was clearly beyond the scope, or is it always a special from the start?
Interactive specials are specials from the start. Because it has to be a plot that only makes sense when there's a giant army of people doing it. And generally when you're looking at a scenario, you're looking at something where one table makes a big impact. So there's a difference in perspective there. Interactive specials also have to be something that's sensible for a lot of people to be doing. So a lot of our specials will take the format of there is an invasion of this area, protect the area, or unlock and explore the area are 2 of our general tropes that we have. So we'll have generally something that uses one of those models, and then we'll be looking at. We also wanted to have a very big scope. I mean, there was sort of the joke that I think I said this last time. We went back in time. We went into outer space. Now what?
Yep.
Where there's kind of an escalation of theme and plot. that happens because you want people to be like, oh man, that's awesome. Since an interactive special it's a special, it should be a special event. And when you get that many Pathfinders together, they should be able to have some kind of tangible impact, whether that is preventing a catastrophe or making a great discovery.
So Craigedy has a great question. Craigedy is being much kinder to our authors and developers than we ourselves actually are with when asking the question. Well, you said how many 70 pages of back matter, tons of pages of things. How many people does it take to write this special, and how many people does it take to develop it?
One and one.
Now, when you say that, is that how many it should take,
no,
or is that just how many we have?
So, an interactive special is assigned to a single author to write. The author does not write the giant appendices in the back. They only write the new customized monsters. And then it has a single developer who takes that through the entire process until it is ready for, So basically, it's just the two of us, the developer and
the two of us.
The developer and the author, and then the developer writes a description of all the art that needs to be brought in. So then at that point, you're bringing in the art team. You're going to be bringing in one or more outside artists to draw the art for that. You're going to be bringing in the editors. We're going to have multiple editors who are going through something of this length, and the editors are never thrilled to see those giant appendices either. And you're going to have the art team someone on the art team needs to lay these things out and get them all formatted. Then
Next
they go
time
back
we have an editor on, we'll ask if they're ever thrilled to see those giant appendices.
And they're going to say no, or they're going to be lucky and they haven't done that. And then so it goes to editing, and then it goes to editing, then it goes to layout, then it goes to the developer to organize everything and get all the page references in. Then it goes back to an editor, and in the very end, as with every scenario, it goes to John for a final checks process to skim back through. But yeah, generally, it really doesn't take that many people because we don't really have that many people. Kubit says, in true Paizo fashion, an interactive special should be assigned to someone who just joined the company, right? No. Interactive specials are not assigned to people who just joined the company. When I joined, it was a few years before.
There was one that was. The only one that was
the Starfinder.
No, that was someone who just joined the company. Was because she technically left and then joined the company again. The giant meteor one.
You're talking. But I think
she had recently rejoined the company.
She wrote it.
Yeah,
I think he's talking about development.
Oh.
Yeah.
No. Oh, I thought he was talking about author.
Crystal wrote one.
I thought he was talking about author.
Authors are generally external freelancers. They are generally our most trusted authors who have been reliable and turned over extremely high quality content over a number of seasons, because we know that we can trust them with something of that magnitude. They also have to have a lot of time available because these things take quite a while to write.
But other than Thirsty, who was, of course, hired for Starfinder Society, so of course he did the first Starfinder Society one. No one has developed an interactive special who hasn't been at the company for at least 3 years.
Well, no, John had to do them initially, right?
Wait a minute. No, you're right. John had to go right in.
He can't do them initially, but it was a few years before. It was a few years before I was involved in anything more than helping with those back appendices. But then I've been doing them now. So yeah, it's not something that we foist on newbies. You really have to have a strong understanding both of the campaign.
Unless you are the only person when you're the newbie.
So that's what happened to make Joe. Aww.
Interactive specials.
Oh, there are many things that there are many things that cause John Compton to sprout salt crystals.
It can happen. It could happen to you.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So let's talk about handling all of the different sub-tiers. Yeah. How do you make it and like we talked about the fact that Seeds of Diamond City actually did something different, but how do you make encounters where the encounter works across 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, 11?
All right.
Or 8, 9, 11, 12.
Okay. So first
you're
going to start with a very broad theme. So something like you're on the wall and demons attack. And that encounter may be you're on the wall in this area and demons attack. And so this is a simple one. And so then you'd be using demons of a variety of levels. Or it might be...
so it could be like Quasit attack all the way up to Glabrezu's attack.
Yeah, so and if it's a bit more complicated, if you have something that's more of a social encounter, then it may go from like, and then it may go from it may or like a an investigation or something like that. Then you change the story around who's your opposition. So like, is the person who you have to track down because they're stealing things like a down on their luck pickpocket who's never stolen anything before, or is it like the master thief who is known only in legends or something like that? So you can change the fundamental structure stays the same in many cases, but you then change the scope of how important it is. In Siege of Galaspire, and in many cases that means you have a much shorter description. In Siege of Galaspire, we kind of parsed out the descriptions a little bit to describe each encounter underneath its subtier, so that we could get a little more stuff.
So Numbat has a question. Rex Liquid has seconded that I'm gonna need a lead-in from you, Linda, before I even understand fully this question. So we're away from the first Pathfinder Society 2 interactive special. Is it already being discussed? Will it follow the PFS normal route or steal some of the Starfinder approach ideas? So, what is some of the Starfinder approach ideas? Like, as far as I knew, the Starfinders were roughly the same with differences based on being Starfinder. But what else is Starfinder Society interactive specials doing that the Pathfinder Societies are not doing?
So I know some things about the most recent one that's been that it released, and then some of the innovations in that, but I don't really want to get into the full.
What about? But they said all the Starfinders approach. So what about the first Starfinder interactive special?
I am not quite as familiar with the first one myself.
As far as I knew, other than like it had starship combat and a few things like that, it wasn't too far out of the realm of possibilities.
There were some interesting locational things going on.
I was being made to run a different adventure at the same time as that, so I sort of heard the announcements, but I didn't see exactly what was going on.
I mean, like,
at Origins.
Yeah, basically, Starfinder Society and Pathfinder Society have both been innovating on ways to do specials. We have not already started discussing the first interactive special for PF2. We need to get through Gen Con and all that kind of stuff first. But we do discuss the interactive specials as a part of our season planning. So certainly before the end of the year, we're going to have a really good idea of what that special is going to look like. Paisley said, I imagine Soldier Champion sub-tiers just made that harder to develop. They're talking about the Siege of Galaspire has 2 difficulty modes. Soldier, which is slightly harder than a standard interactive special, but then there's also some more help that can be had too, and Champion is a hard mode. Alex says, Starfinder Society's a lot more players determine the storyline in terms of the sense that scenario outcomes have a much faster impact on society.
Well, sure. Yeah. I mean, I knew that about Starfinder Society overall, but that's not like a structure of interactive specials thing. Okay. Numbat qualifies. There are smoother transitions between some of the encounters as one type closes just a section and opens another, but you can complete what you're in and it still counts. Not well described. Actually,
that's still the case in Pathfinder Society.
Pathfinder Society, the one with the big explosion, had that where it was like, oh, we've opened up this thing to do, but you can keep doing it wherever you want.
Yeah, in general, the more modern specials have instructions, Pathfinder Society included, where to the overseer GM, where if a table reports a success of a type and like. And the players have moved on. In some cases, you just still count that as the next type of success, unless it's a really big, hard transition between parts. But that's one of the things that we've been continuing to investigate and explore is ways to soften up those transitions. Because on the one hand, we want people to be able to complete their encounters, but on the other hand, we don't want people to be feeling perpetually behind. So we want to make sure that they can catch up so that they're participating in like the big climactic encounter. So it's always a balancing act.
So Arcane is wondering why level 9 is the odd one out. So assuming you're running 1 to 11, there's got to be one that's missing because that's an odd number and not an even. And I believe that traditionally the reason 9 is the most likely one that's missing is because it either had to be 9 or 7 just because of the way that it worked out, and 7 has a pre-generated character at that level. And 9 does not. So that would make it awkward to use those pre-generated characters no matter what if 7 was the gap level.
Yeah, and then for Galaspire, we have a gap level of 14 because that was based off of taking what we had for the 1 to 11s and adding we started by adding a 12 to 15 on top of that, and then we wanted to expand that to allow 16. So we just pulled the sub tiers apart by one in there. And I know some people were saying like, why didn't you just add another one so that you cover all of them? And the issue is that already that number of sub tiers that it has, the number of sub tiers that a special has, kind of strains every aspect of the production process. So adding more is just another would be just another hurdle to go through.
All right. Alex also mentions that the Starfinder interactives have a lot more of skills and smart roleplay, which he calls the Linda special.
It's not just me.
Even though
John does it.
John does that a lot as well.
Yeah, I think that we both I think that that's one of the things also that that John and I have in common in terms of our development styles is both really liking to have roles for Alex. I'm not accepting credit for something that is not.
Hold on, I think there's a reason why Linda could take some credit for this, even though John also really likes these kind of things.
Okay.
Here's why.
All right.
I'm going to go back to a survey datum that is one of my favorite random survey data that didn't really help us make the game, but I just think it's cool from Doomsday Dawn, which is a lot of people, including definitely John, when I've heard him talk about things at Pathfinder Society meetings, feel like that, and you just maybe all of you, or a lot of you, feel like, wow, I'm one of the few people, or my group's one of the few groups that really likes doing that thing that Alex just said, the role play and the overcoming challenges and making friends with people. But really, we're weird outliers, and like 90% of the tables are doing just to kill every encounter that is an optional talk or optional kill, and they're murder hoboing. But what we discovered from Doomsday Dawn data of Part 4 of Doomsday Dawn is whether they were experienced or complete noobs, whether they loved or hated the playtest, 75% of tables were not only befriending like the obvious Fae that were like, hey, I'm a friendly Fae, but befriending some Cyclops that like literally want to attack you, and you have to make several successful social skills that if you fail, they will attack you. So, and you absolutely, like, that means more than 75% wanted to befriend the Cyclops because some of them failed. But we didn't have that data at the time. So I believe that the introduction of Linda onto the team, which Alex said Linda was doing these things, I think it made John do them more because he had a second person who
to back that
up, who liked the same kinds of things. It's not just me as much, and so he put more in.
Okay, fair enough.
That's my
It's hard for me to tell
analysis.
How many tables do that, even though I've jammed a lot of tables, because frankly, if a table just goes through and all they want to do is smack the monsters and they don't want to talk to anyone, I'm probably not going to remember that table for very long because it's not that interesting to me.
So Arcane's table befriended the ridiculously over-leveled sea monster in the lake with a ridiculous nature check. So see, I bet that that's not even one of the listed expected options, but given that like the river goes up to the place you need to go, they should have gotten some extra ally points if they brought that sucker up there.
Like when that reminds me of in Shadow Star when you made friends with the Hydra and then like.
Oh yeah.
And then the mayor made the mistake of saying that he would give you a reward per head.
Why did you say that?
I don't know. I wasn't thinking about Hydras. I was just trying to say it in a cool way. And then you're like,
we didn't trick him into saying per head.
I know.
That as soon as he said that, my wizard said, "Can we have that in writing?"
And he's like, sure.
He's like,
sure. I had not thought.
And you hadn't thought of it at that point. And after it was signed, we brought in our entire group, which included a 12-headed Hydra.
He was not happy.
And the amount he gave per head was actually a lot because of the fact that Linda wanted to give that much to each piece. I have to post the squirrel, but remember, Brian said that that's a celebration of squirrelage. It is not. It does not mean we can't squirrel. All right. Small high-pitched noise there. That was too much laughter and excitement.
All right, we're just around 1 minute.
Let's be more reserved now and go churn butter.
Why is churning butter? What does churning butter have to do with
I don't know. It just does.
Okay.
All right. So, let's talk a little bit more about what are the similarities between an interactive special and the infinitely replayable, super mega long non-interactive specials like from the Tome of Righteous Repose and Beyond the Half-Light Path.
All right.
Other than the fact that Brian Duckwitz did both Beyond the Half-Light Path and Siege of Gallowspire.
Okay. So a infinitely replayable, many part adventure and the model of Half-Life Path and Tome of Righteous Repose is more challenging to develop than an interactive special because where an interactive special has a lot of content, but the content generally stays in its own lane in terms of each sub tier, and then you have sort of this layer of interactivity on top of it. A One of those scenarios has a giant matrix of options where each of them fits together with another one, and you can create hundreds upon hundreds of different combinations. And you need to make sure that all of them read together in a coherent way and that you don't have any contradictions. And how on earth are you supposed to organize all that information? So I would say that they both require a strong sense of organization and adventure flow, and providing a lot of different encounters and a lot of different options. Um, yeah, so that's where they're similar. Okay. Sure.
So Nitrous says that one of the issues with specials is sometimes it's hard to get the full story. Do you have any thoughts about how to make it easier to be able to experience the story in an interactive special with the frenetic pace and all the energy and the loud noises?
Yeah. So one of the things that I do think helps is what we do at some of our larger events, where we have the text not just read by the overseer GM, but also scrolling in large text on the board. Knowing that stuff is going to be going by quickly and other things, and even with all that, the players may not hear it. As a table GM, it can be good practice to print out and cut out the overseer text, because then you can just kind of give that as a handout to your players so they can go back and catch up on whatever they missed with all the other things that are going on.
That makes sense, and definitely at Siege of Gallowspire is one of the few times that I heard not just people just cheering when it's like you win, but like gasps and other reactions from the house. I think that's not a spoiler to say.
Yeah, there were some reactions to a thing that happened during that adventure. No spoilers in this stream, people.
Yep.
But yeah, so I would say that like because the overseer text contains the summary and the transitions, that's probably going to be the most bang for your buck in terms of information that you can hand out, that GMs can hand out to players. Also, just asking your GM if you're lost, to paraphrase something, and to sort of give that context. And another thing too is that the specials are not written to assume that you are going to be going at a breakneck pace through all of the encounters. So really, there is time for you to pause. There is time for you to go back and say, okay, what's going on here? And also, one of the things that we've been moving toward in the most recent ones is undefined breaks. So in earlier specials, there was a situation where there would be an intermission that occurs at a specified time, and the problem with that is that then you have 1,000 people trying to go into the bathroom in a 10 to 15 minute period at Gen Con, and that just does not work. So we now have more flexible breaks, where basically it's anywhere during this part, find a good time for your table, and then take the 10 to 15 minute break. So now that that's in, that can also be a time to possibly regroup and revise, and like whoever's back at the time when some people are going to the bathroom or whatever, be like, hey, what's been going on? Let's catch up on what's happening.
Right, that makes sense.
And it is true that you're not necessarily going to get every single detail of what's going on. But at the very least, those big transitions and those big announcements should handle the most important things. And then each individual encounter kind of acts as its own capsule as well.
So a few people have asked about Starfinder Society's limited replayable specials, where you can replay as long as it's really far in level and on a different character.
Yeah.
Is that something you were considering for Pathfinder 2nd Edition interactive specials?
I am not going to make any commitment at this time, but I do think that that's a really interesting idea, particularly since, as I said, being really far in level can really, even if you're fighting something and it's like, okay, first you fight the demon, and then you fight and then you deal with the thief. It could be very different in that context, especially because also, unless you're that table that's playing in the breakneck pace, you're not going to see every encounter in the entire scenario. So I think that's certainly an interesting thing that's worth considering for the future.
And Jam says sometimes you can slow down and enjoy the story instead of staying at a breakneck pace. That's definitely true. Craigie D wonders how long does each part run on average? Not counting the part ones that are just sort of like the mustering, although maybe count them separately, but give them a different time.
The mustering phase generally is given the time of 15 to 20 minutes longer, or part one, 15 to 20 minutes or longer if mustering requires. That one's very flexible and based on what the house needs. Generally, parts range anywhere from 60 minutes at the minimum. That's really the shortest you can have. That's kind of the time to give for one, and for if you're counting on them having one encounter and that's it. And you can have parts that are even longer than 2 hours if they're just that big central core part. Like part 3 of Siege of Gallowspire is rather lengthy, and it actually ends up being divided into 2 subparts as well. So yeah, they can vary pretty dramatically, but it's going to be somewhere between 1 hour and it's going to be under 3 hours though, because there still needs to be transitional. So probably between 1 hour and 2.5 hours per part.
All right, that's a very good guideline. So let's see. We've talked a little bit about the different sub tiers, the different parts for an interactive special. So part one, we've said, is going to be a mustering. What would you say, stepping back from exactly what different parts are, what would you say would you call part two and part three of the adventures? If part one is the mustering, like, you know how stories have climaxes and rising action and falling action.
So part two, if it's a shorter one, can often be, so what's the story and what are we doing here? Part three is usually, we have lots of time to go and explore this giant area things are happening, and we're going to do all these different missions and see what happens.
And part four, the final showdown.
And then if there's a part four, then part four is more like final showdown. You have that kind of structure. And sometimes they'll mix and match around a little bit, but you usually have some encounters where it's some sense of grounding, then some part where you have a big part where you have a lot of choices in the encounters, and then a conclusion where everything all wraps down to the end.
So narrow, wide, narrow.
Yes, narrow, wide, narrow is a good way to describe the structure.
For general structure, like an introduction is narrow, then a wide, open area, narrow as you finish off at the end. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So what about the rewards for an interactive special? So this is obviously a big gathering where you need to get a lot of people to even run it at all. Yeah. Are there any kind of different philosophy on designing the rewards?
So in a standard scenario, you will have gold rewards and prestige rewards that are fame rewards and Starfighter that are based on what you did in the course of the scenario. Generally, in an interactive special, like, nobody wants to be nickel and diming treasure throughout, that kind of thing. And it's just not really worth it. So generally in an interactive special, it's a special event. You get full fame / prestige, and you get full gold if you participate in the scenario, and XP if you participate in the scenario and kind of make it through to the end of the adventure.
Even if you only finish like one encounter?
Even if you only finish one encounter,
What if you were on a different plane and you got plane shifted off after the first encounter, but you sit there for the rest of the session?
If you participate in the adventure, then you get the full rewards for that. But interactive specials also tend to have more boons in the end, and rewards. And if you want to get those, then generally you'll want to be making more progress. One of the structures we've used in more recent ones is a long list of boons based on certain actions that players can take and that groups can take. And with a system in which tables receive a reward if either enough tables in the house achieve that mission, or if they succeeded at their part of the mission. So that way either way they win. And a table that struggles, a house that does great, is going to get a lot of rewards, and a table that does great and a house that struggles is going to get a lot of rewards. You really have to have both your table not doing well and the house not doing well before you lose.
And the support characters each have their own special rewards as well. For Gallowspire?
Yeah, there's a system with that as well, but that depends on some of the tighter mechanics that I'm not necessarily going to get into here.
That's fair, but because they have support characters, will the support characters be able to get any rewards for themselves, or are they only earning it for the main character?
Yeah, so the support characters, or A characters, they're called in Siege of Gallowspire, do not earn XP and gold. But there is a chance that they could possibly earn a boon based on that they actually get to apply to themselves based on their experience. Uh, but yeah.
So that's the gauntlet. Earn them all.
Yep.
All right.
But you gotta if you want to earn boons, you gotta participate. So.
Yeah. You gotta try if you want to succeed.
Mhm.
That's definitely
and
true.
that's what I'll say about that.
All right. So we got through rewards. So we talked a little bit about what it looks like on your end, and also we did mention there is one author.
Yes.
Can you tell us a little bit about? Obviously, you haven't written an interactive special, but can you tell us a little bit about what it means to be the author for an interactive special?
Yeah.
What does the author have to go through? What is the process? What did they send you? Like when you say to someone, "Hey, this is going to be in Gallowspire, and here are some things we know we need." Like how much back and forth is there on that? Because in a normal scenario, there's when I know there's an expanded outline where they expand your outline and one milestone. But surely with something this long, there's got to be more than that.
Well, first of all, the initial outline that an author gets sent for an interactive special is much longer than a standard one. I think Gallowspire's initial outline was about 5 pages long. In part because
5 pages all of outline.
Yeah, 5 pages of outlining alone. In part because it includes certain tips for interactive special writing, such as don't just have a boss that splits into many clones of itself that people fight infinitely.
There's 1,000 monks.
Other things like that we've learned from past specials. That it's like here's things that people work. Try to limit the number of maps that you're using and use the front and back side. And if you find yourself wanting to use more maps, try to see if you can use the front and back side of them. Things like that. So it has a lot of advice there. It also provides a lot of structural thing. It references them to previous specials for some of the interactive mechanics. And if there's something that's radically different, say in the case of Siege of Gallowspire, I had about a page and a half where I was just writing proto mechanics for all of that, and it was like, hey, you can modify these if you want, but here's a starting point. So the question, so we put all that together, and then there's definitely more back and forth as we go through. There can be, and it's less of a here's more formal milestones, and here's more of like a hey, here's we're gonna do this, where we're gonna have this ongoing conversation about various parts. And in that case with the interactive author, I'm gonna be a lot more like boom boom. I get an email from them, I'm gonna make sure to respond same day, no matter what else is going on, because I know that they really need that direction.
So people are wondering exactly how far does that mean that you need to start these in advance. Like Brian even asked, has it already been assigned for next year?
We assign them. So I believe that so let's see. We assigned this one in it was due in January or February. So the author window is generally 7 weeks for a standard scenario. For an interactive special, it's more like 10 to 12 for writing it. And that's from the time between when the author gets the outline and to when they're expected to turn that back over.
All right. So that means that it'll probably is assigned in May and is fully cooked up sometime in March to April.
Yeah. So in this case, yeah, it was assigned. I think this one may have been assigned in November and being due in February or whatever, just because the holidays were weird and things like that. You also have to consider holiday weeks and things like that when this.
Oh right. Sorry, I threw that all off because I was going back from the date of the adventure, but there's a whole bunch of stuff that happens.
There's a whole bunch of stuff that happens after that. Yeah, because
Yeah, so it's signed in November, due in.
It was signed in October, November, and then it was due in February because we needed to have it ready for May.
February,
and we needed because we needed to have it ready for May. We needed to wait 3 weeks for development and a bunch of other stuff. The whole process was so long that we had to have it ready months in advance.
I skipped a step, but I sort of had close-ish months.
Yeah.
Just not with the right steps.
So that was that was a late year assignment for one that was at PaizoCon. So we're gonna probably be looking at assigning that interactive special early 2020, very early 2020.
Early 2020.
To have it ready for Gen Con, yeah.
Because it doesn't have to be for PaizoCon.
Because it doesn't have to be for PaizoCon, exactly.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
Which is part of why we need them planned at the beginning of the when we do the initial season planning, because those have to be assigned pretty darn early.
Yep, and since they often lead into a new season, that means that the next season has to be known well enough to think about what's going to be the transition. So you always have to be kind of 2 steps ahead, so you know what your season is, and you know at least enough about what you're wrapping up and what you're going into that
that you can move on to that. So like we have, so like right now we have a pretty darn solid grasp on Year of the Open Road and what's going to be going on throughout that this next year. But we don't. We have like kind of these tentative proto bits that are starting to come together for year 2 as well.
All right. Well, that's super cool. Do you have any idea what the special that launches year 2 and ends year 1 is going to be?
Nope.
Though? Okay.
I have no idea what that's going to be yet. That's sure going to be some fun brainstorming meetings. So those specials are always fun to cook up.
Sounds awesome.
And you'll know when I know because you'll probably be at the meeting where that happens. Assuming that you can get enough time to come to the meeting because I know you.
Yeah, well, that's an assumption that may not be true.
Yeah. Game Mastery Guide.
Game Okay. No, but I love the Game Mastery Guide. I just would love it even more if we had more time to work on it before this. But then there was this whole edition that we're putting out.
Yeah, it's just a little project.
Yeah, I hear that it's coming out in a few weeks. I think the internet is going to explode. Yeah, it's super cool, and Kubets would love the GMG even more if it was already done. To be honest with you, Kubets, whenever the GMG comes out, I'll have wanted it to have come out months before that.
Yep.
Because I would like the GMG to come out as soon as possible after the game comes out. It's just that realistically it was impossible. Our other option was just not having the designers do any sort of check on any other product that was being put out and only just stay like we did in first edition, silo ourselves only into our own books with a new edition that's not as Pathfinder First Edition had very few changes from 3.5, so people who had done a lot of 3.5 needed to learn some things, but in Pathfinder Second Edition, the story is the same. The themes and mechanics lead to the same outcomes in a lot of ways, but the way you have to think about the philosophy as a developer and a designer is different enough that we needed to be there, and we probably should have been there in First Edition, to be candid. We just weren't.
Yeah. Well, I know that the changes that you've made to the scenarios, because you reviewed all of the Pathfinder Society scenarios that are going to be coming out at Gen Con, and he's made some really big improvements throughout those as well. So
I think that Eleanor's Adventure I didn't really improve that much, but all the other ones had at least something that I made a major change to help with the mechanics flow. Let me see. Also, Arcane says it is lovely to get an Unchained-like book so early in the life cycle of PF2. I do want to specify, as you'll see in the product page, there is a chapter that is like that in the Game Mastery Guide. It is not all an Unchained book. Everything that it says in that product page is in there, and one of the chapters is variants like Unchained. All right.
A little off topic, says Cardi, but when is the earliest a PF2 second edition character could be made? Tomorrow on No Direction.
Yeah, we're going to literally make a second edition PFS character on No Direction. We are going to bring what we need, and it's not going to be made in advance.
Nope, we're just going to make
I don't think Ryan and Param have what they need to even have done it in advance, and we're going to ask them to make decisions, and we're just going to show you that we can do it very quickly.
Yep.
And Sheppy says, My Master Guide looks amazing, a real must-buy. I will say thank you, because it is the only product description I've ever written for Paizo. It's my first one, so if you think it's a must-buy from the product description, that makes me super happy.
Yay, Mark!
Arcane, I figured you knew that it wasn't an Unchained book, but I just didn't want to get anyone's hopes up. Rocket Lettuce is wondering about the advanced GM screen, and saying that he knows we don't use the screen, but he loves some charts. So, while I don't use the screen, I'm just going to say, even the not advanced GM screen, just the selections Logan made for what to put onto it were so apropos that I just brought out a printout of it when I was going to PaizoCon to run stuff and gave one to Linda just because it has so many of the things I needed.
There are several people in the office who have printouts of the GM screen tacked on their wall above their cubicle just so that they can use it for reference because it's amazing.
It is a very good reference. As for the advanced GM screen, well, that's pretty advanced. It is so advanced.
Oh, really?
No, it is so
Tell
advanced.
me how advanced it
It is
is, Mark
so
Seidler.
advanced that I don't even know what's going to be on it because it's too advanced for me. That's how advanced it is. So, if you want something that's so advanced that even I don't know what's going to be on it, that's the one for you. If you're like, oh, yeah, well, of course the simple untrained DC is 10, and the simple trained DC is 15, and the simple
The
expert
Expert
DC is 20, and the simple master DC is 30, and the simple legendary DC is 40. Everybody
Duh.
knows that, and everybody knows all the conditions and what they do, basic summary and things like that that are on the regular
Brian
GM
says
screen.
you'll need a degree from MIT to comprehend the advanced GM screen. You need more than that because we both have MIT degrees and we don't know what's on it. So
I think once things are on it, our degrees are going to be enough to understand it.
I think so too. I think so too. And overall, just the idea that second edition is a lot easier for folks to pick up. I think it's going to be.
I think that the advanced gem screen is gonna probably have some more advanced things on it for people who are building their own stuff and just doing more advanced topics. Whereas the regular, but I don't know what's actually gonna be on it yet. And whereas the regular screen has things for running your game that are the most useful things for running it. So if you build a little fort with both of them, then you are the most powerful GM ever. All right, so back on the topic, surprisingly enough, of interactive specials. Do you feel like there's any other part of the art of interactive specials that we've not gone into? So we've got, I would say, we've done the development, which is the main thing we're talking about. We talked a little bit about the authors back and forth and the overseer. What about the players?
Mm-hmm.
Can we do something very brief? How do the players fit into this?
How do the players fit into this? Well, with so many sub tiers, you're generally going to have a fair amount of people shuffling around a little bit. Certainly, when organizing specials, organizers try to muster people together in the same in groups based on their sub tiers, so that you can all gather together. But sometimes players are going to need to move around or be a little flexible with what they play, just to make the sub tiers work better. In part because one of the differences with interactive specials is that they do not, unlike a standard scenario, have a 4-player adjustment. So really, in most cases, you're going to want to make sure that you have 6 players and that everybody's in tier for the adventure. And that's just because the amount of scaling that would take and the number of sidebars that would be all over the place is just kind of untenable. Now, mind you, whether or not we could possibly reconsider that in second edition, that's a can of worm we haven't quite opened, but it's one that I would like to open and at least consider the possibility.
Also, Alex recommends a gourd leshy with a squirrel poking out of the head.
Yeah, so I would say make sure if you're playing in Siege of Gallospire, bring your aid characters.
Don't forget them.
Don't forget them. And yeah, if you're playing other special, try to bring, if you have options, a few different options that are in that sub tier. And make sure to gather together to muster with your friends and anyone else you want to specifically be sure to play with. There's no seat saving in interactive special mustering.
Banded together from remote galaxies,
yes.
The Legion of Doom.
Mm-hmm. And generally, if you buy, generally you'll buy tickets based on the sub tier you're playing. And you can also, in a lot of cases, buy generic tickets, and then those are just going to be a little more flexible with where you end up getting placed. So we can also talk about should also talk about GMing interactive specials, because I know that's going to be that's going to be something that's going to be coming out for a lot of folks. So in terms of GMing interactive special, I know I mentioned before that is the type of GMing that I personally don't enjoy, because I like to go off on role playing, not entirely squirrels. But I do like to really get into whatever aspects of the story the players are having fun with, and take the time to ham it up and really get into what they're excited about. But with that, but I have GM'd them before, and so I do have some advice in terms of that. Yeah, make sure you have all your maps ready in advance for sure, and all the miniatures that you're going to need. Keep in mind the highlight or otherwise mark all the transition points for the overseer text in one way, and all the times when you need to do something based on what the overseer announces as well, because otherwise it can be easy to miss that kind of stuff. There is like GM instructions at the beginning of each section, but when you're running around and flipping things like that, it can be good to just have. And you may want to make like a handout for yourself based on however you organize those pieces of information, or like have a printout. Rex Liquid makes that, have those conditions printed out. So yeah, so if you have extra pages where you print out like extra copies of the pages you know you're gonna have to constantly flip back to or whatever, that can be useful. And FYAHM says record what the overseer says instead of you, because you sound really stupid if you already read it before the overseer starts.
That's what you were saying about highlighting them in different colors, right?
Yeah. So exactly. So marking what's going on there and who says what and what you're supposed to be doing. Also, work together as a team for prep and look what others have done as well. Numbat says that's a really great plan. Working together with other GMs. There for Gen Con and PaizoCon, there's a Slack channel that a bunch of GMs are on, so that they can ask questions on that. You can ask your overseer as well in advance if you have any questions. Make sure that you bring everything with you. That you have copies of all of your handouts and things like that, or that you've made sure that the venue is going to have anything that you don't. The venue has anything that you wouldn't otherwise bring. So like that you have your tracking sheets if you need them, but you don't necessarily need them if they don't. Chronicle sheets, etc. And yeah, just keeping up with the pacing. It's a good practice to the overseer GM has in their section the sort of the timeline of the scenario, but it's good for the table GMs to keep that in mind too, so you know, and keep out your phone or a watch or something, so you can check every once in a while, see how you're doing on time, and use that to make judgment calls about when you want to speed up encounters to make sure that players do enough things, when you maybe don't want to start another encounter because you know the overseer is going to call soon. When's a good time to make a bathroom break so that the players don't miss the announcements, things like that. So time is very important. Time is very important in that regard.
So Noah the Shark had a very serious suggestion for a new Paizo product.
Okay.
Which is 4 tablets with like a cool Paizo picture that is along the back of all 4 of them. If you set them up like a GM screen, and then you just can put your own GM screen information because they're tablets. And it's called the customizable GM screen. I feel like that's going to be way more expensive than any of our other products.
Yeah, I think that's going to be at a price point that's going to be a bit prohibitive. I'm also thinking about the folding what way the tablets fold. Are you having like an accordion fold where they go back and forth? And what kind of the nightmare that would be the case on this kind of thing to protect all the screens?
That's a good point. Plus, this is Paizo. They probably have to be iPads, so.
Oh yeah, they'd probably have to be iPads because all of our stuff that we use at work is Mac.
Except the servers.
Yeah. Miss the duct tape.
There's duct tape. That's what makes it really heavy duty product.
You know, Rocket Lettuce. There is a fair amount of Paizo art that's part of the community use package. So if you wanted to duct tape together a bunch of tablets,
it was no hard the Shark's idea. So if you want to kickstart your new GM screen that is duct taped together tablets with community use art on the back.
Yeah.
I'm sure it would probably not fun, but if it did, I would be happy to, or if it was even close, I'd be happy to mention on the stream our own Know How the Shark is funding a project.
Now I'm just imagining it, but now I'm not thinking of it with our art on the back. I'm thinking of it with a variety of shark-based emojis and symbols on the back. So you've got like the cute shark and things like that.
You would have like a shark with like little glasses and a GM screen.
Oh yeah, no heart. Did you see that after that other episode I totally made Mark watch Baby Shark?
So, I think we have made it to the point where we have said what we're going to say about GMing and playing in interactive specials.
Does anyone have any other questions?
Yeah, does anyone have any questions we didn't get to that we either missed you or you've not asked your question yet about interactive specials? Because I feel like otherwise we should go into our outro for YouTube. All right. So, bye YouTube. See you next time on Arcade Mark.